We have Erin Snow on tonight. So, for those of you watching the video afterwards, so our clinical director, Erin Snow, is here and then alternates with Dr. Rob. So we've gone to this format. It's been working really well. A different perspective, but Erin is working directly with the clients who are in our residential treatment program, overseeing all aspects of that, overseeing our betrayed partner, empowered women's retreat. So intricately connected to all of this work and really skilled at and really passionate. I think everyone on our team is really passionate about this work. So we are going to get started with questions. Oh, here you go. Both partners are here. Addict, PA, intimacy, anorexia has 2 months sobriety. Both partners are in individual therapy support groups, and addict is in SAA 12-step. Formal therapeutic disclosure is 6+ months off, and we both want to work on sexual intimacy in the meantime. Do you have any recommendations for us?
Well, yeah. I mean, so it's a challenge, right? I always say working toward disclosure is a hard time to work on sexual intimacy, mainly because you don't know what you don't know. And I just think that, especially when it comes to our bodies, you want to have full consent over what you are consenting to. And so I would say 6 months is a long time. Although I want to always encourage that the process is done thoroughly and excellently. And if your CSAT is saying that's what it's going to take to get us there, 100% go with that. I would say, working on your emotional intimacy is going to come first. Okay. And then there's processes like sensitive focus is one that I love, because it does not actually focus on sex. It focuses on sexual communication outside of sex, what you like, what you don't like, focusing on what your boundaries are, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And it starts in a graded task assignment. So really starting from a place of, it could be, we're both sitting up, clothed, lights are on, we're watching a movie. That could be stage one. And the whole point is to check in with yourself as you're going through each stage. What feels good to me? Does it feel good to sit next to my partner and we're holding hands? How do I like to hold hands? I mean, we're talking the minutia, that this is something that many of us have entered into our sexual lives without ever understanding how to communicate around our boundaries, our wants, our desires, our needs. So I would say that as you're preparing for this, don't dive into the deep end, because you may find that, especially without disclosure, you can have some trauma responses around being in your most vulnerable state, which is sexual intercourse, right? Somebody is literally inside of you. That's as vulnerable as it's going to get for a woman. And so being really careful around a really thorough process of learning to communicate and have emotional intimacy before you get to that place. Sensitive focus is a great way, and you can talk to your CSATs about this, because I think they probably know you better than anyone in this process about where you are and what you're ready for, and how to set up a system that works really well for the two of you to create some stages to get you to that place. But I do caution a little bit around jumping into intercourse when you don't have full consent over your body, because you don't really know what your partner is going to be disclosing. And that's just something I've seen be traumatic. And then it's hard to be fully connected in that way when you're still not on that wavelength of everything is between us. We have laid it all on the table. So that's my advice would be, get really good at your boundaries, your communication, checking in with your body, being able to communicate what's going on in your body with your partner, emotional intimacy, and all the ways that you can touch and be and connect with one another that are not full-blown sex. And actually, senses focuses away from orgasm altogether until that actually happens at some point in the later stages. So something to consider. And I don't know, Tammy.
No, that's exactly, yeah, because like I would have loved if you said we want to work on intimacy in the meantime, like intimacy, non-sexual intimacy, because like there's like back the whole truck up, it's like like can you just sit and hold hands? Can you be like Erin's example? Can you be on the couch and have no socks on and be playing footsie? Like, I mean, like those are very intimate, connections without, intercourse. So yeah, everybody gets to pick your journey. I love that Erin said too, check with your therapist who know you best, and when it's 6 months plus out, if you guys are both doing the work, I think I'd ask why the duration of time, and could you if you're really doing the work, maybe it doesn't need to be that far out, so that you can have some closure from that aspect. It's an event, it's not, it's just part of the journey. It's not like, oh, now we're all good. So
Yeah. Because I also understand, you're married, you're in the or you're partnered, you're in this road together, you're both doing the work. I understand that sex has been a part of your relationship and you want it to be a part of your relationship. And it can be such a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, in this process, it's fractured and there's a lot of trauma that's involved in it. And so just making sure that you're doing this the right way so that you're not creating kind of new ruptures and new fractures that you have to then tend to in this whole process. So yeah, I think see what your CSATs have to say. They
yeah.
know you best, and focus on all the ways in which you can, when you get to that place, it feels so right because you've done all the lead up work.
Well, and you also talk about the communication, because like
Mhm.
that is often a part that is completely missing,
Oh yeah.
and assumptions are made. So I really think it's important for each and both of you to have, candid discussions of, about things, which again is part of sensate focus, because you're talking about what feels right and what is not yet. So
Yeah. And because I have found you can have couples that communicate really well around 1,000 things. Logistically, they're, fun areas of life and deep philosophical discussions, but sex can be an area where couples struggle to communicate because it's one of those areas where people take it very personally. That if I don't like something, then it's directly tied to I'm rejecting you. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can absolutely be communication that is, I'm sharing my needs and wants with you and what feels good and doesn't feel good. And that's about me. And you can hold space for me while I'm sharing those things, and vice versa. And it really can enrich your sex life. I mean, because so many couples just go to this nonverbal communication, which is like we're communicating with our bodies, which don't know how to communicate some of the specifics and nuances around what they actually want. And people get afraid of hurting the other one. So you'll hear couples, they've gone 30 years having sex the same way. And they were both like, yeah, I would have loved it if it was a little different, but they never
mm,
communicated it because they were afraid of hurting somebody. So, anyways,
mm.
communication is key. And this is a great time to practice, start working on that.
Great suggestions. Okay, so the next one. It is said that sex bonds you to your partner emotionally, physically, and spiritually. My question is, if sex addiction is a lifelong struggle, how can you ever truly form a full connection with you? It's like if they were in love with an ex-spouse but married to you, sure, they cannot be actively trying to be with that ex, but if the ex is always in the back of their mind, how can you compete? If they're still in love with that ex, they can choose to be with you, but will never be able to give themselves to you fully if their heart mind longs to be for someone else. The X being acting out in this analogy.
Mhm.
Sure, an SA cannot act out and work on recovery, but if the desire to slip up is always lurking, they're in the dark, dusty corners of their minds. I feel as though they can never connect with you fully.
Mm. This is a great question. Let me tell you something. The clients, the addicts that I've worked with, they have never learned how to have sex in an emotional and vulnerable way. Um, and they're very compartmentalized. They can, in one sense, say, I am a great husband and a great father, and this is who I am here. And then, wall, this is what I'm doing in the dark. And at some point, like the whole point of recovery is to integrate those two people into one human being. But addiction and compulsive sexual behavior is transactional. It is the whole point of it. It can't exist actually if there's like deep, real emotional connection, because that's not actually attachment. That is not deep intimacy. even affairs for many that have gotten involved on a more emotional level, they're not dealing with the kids, the bills, the day-to-day, the, all of the things that require deep communication and partnership to navigate. So what you're competing with is something that actually doesn't have any root. It has no legs. It is simply for the dopamine hit, and the compulsive nature in which sex addiction thrives is for validation and the hot button moment of, but that is not intimacy at all. In fact, I would say that almost every addict that comes in has an underlying intimacy disorder. That's the thing that's been fractured, is in their attachment, in their childhood, in their process. They have never learned how to be intimately connected to a romantic partner without going out the back door, because they don't know how to stay safely connected to somebody else. And the process of recovery, the whole goal is to integrate and to heal some of that past pain, to get into a program where I'm actually now accountable and connected and responsible to other human beings. And for many of our clients, sex for the first time ever is an inside job. It's an intimacy job. It's not something that it's ever been, which is why many of our partners will say, yeah, he's never looked me in the eyes, or it's been so fast, or I wonder where his mind is during this whole thing. Sex, when you're competing with an addict in active addiction, is not intimacy. That is a transactional physical act. And so the goal would be that in recovery, when they're coming to the emotional table and they're saying, I'm doing the healing, I want to learn to connect to you. Because they have to. There is no other way to really remain in recovery long term if you don't connect to other human beings, you don't heal some of that attachment wounds. And so sex will be very different. And the point is to get to a place where sex is an emotional and physical act. It is not just a physical transactional, which, yes, you're absolutely right. A sex addict that always has sex as just a strictly physical transactional act, there's nothing to compete with. I mean, they're always going to have it in a way that does not have attachment. That's the point, is it's easy. There's no risk of harm. There's no expectations or commitments or responsibilities attached to it. So my goal for you and your partner would be, as you heal, that you find truly the magic that sex can be when you are an integrated, one full human being in recovery. And that takes time. It's not, I got sober yesterday and now I showed up. These things take time, but when you arrive there, you will know it. And it is really difficult to act present in that act of sexual intimacy and be somewhere else in your mind. And so again, like I said with the first person, there are steps to get there. There's steps to cultivate and practice that, and to remain connected in ways you will know, because you're able to do it when you're not having sex. And you add sex in, and it's like, I didn't lose that connection with you. And yes, it's convoluted because sex is included in their addiction, but that's not intimacy at all. So yeah, it can be really beautiful, and you can actually have a partner, and an addict that are engaged in a relationship in recovery and healing where they're not thinking about all of their acting out behaviors. That is absolutely possible, and it happens all the time for our couples that are healing. Because you can't be in connection and addiction at the same time, like true connection, honesty, and presence with someone, and in addiction. You can't do them both. So yeah, it's possible, and you can.
And I hear the fear, and like,
Yes.
I'm not, I'm not dismissing any of that, but yeah, Erin, Dr. Rob talks all the time. Addicts are seeking intensity, not
Yes.
intimacy. We have a fear of vulnerability, of connection, and so I think you can trust your gut on to what your partner is, if they're really connected. The other thing is, relapse prevention plans. If I'm starting to have thoughts, guess what? That's a, hey, what's going on with me? Am I bored? Am I stressed? Like, that's information for me so that I can go step into my outer circle, get the help that I need so that I don't slide into, the inner circle behaviors. So a life in recovery. I love that our program is called Seeking Integrity. We seek that for ourselves. We want to help the clients have that for them, for themselves too. And they're going to show up differently, for their partners. They won't be compartmentalized of like, oh, I'm leaving that at the door and then I'm walking through the door. And I say this all the time, with people too. It's like, yeah, the affair partner, it's the dopamine, it's high risk, it's, but it's not taking out the garbage. It's not paying, it's not all of those mundane things. And you don't know how often I hear from people who were formerly the affair partner and they're getting cheated on, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, but now you're the normal, and there's still all that excitement out there, but it's disconnection. And for addicts who are willing to do this work and they start to discover what real communication, real connection is, where real vulnerability, it's terrifying, not gonna lie. And the most rewarding thing on the planet is being in real and meaningful connection with another person who gets you and accepts you for who you are. That's the fear with an addict. It's like, well, if I want you to come close, then I want to push you away. Come close, push you away, because I don't. It's going to be really scary if you really saw the underneath, side of who I am. So it's a journey for both of you, and at some point it's going to be, I have to be willing to trust just a little bit, to see where this goes. And you guys won't do it perfectly, but if you're willing to commit to the process, you guys can have so much more than you could even have imagined, but it's if you're willing. So, okay. The next question, Erin, is, my SA partner is still in active addiction. He doesn't think his thinking is that distorted. Can you please discuss common thought distortions and signs of this? That's one of them, is that he doesn't think his thinking is distorted, but please share.
Oh yeah, all kinds of distorted thinking in addiction. I see commonly a couple of things. One is everything is personalized. So everything happening is because of me or about me. Addiction is inherently very narcissistic. So thinking about, you have a feeling, partner, and instantly I'm in a shame spiral. I can't hold the space for you to have feelings and thoughts and reflect and validate those. I have to go to this place of, well, and usually that looks, actually, the shame spiral is not usually what's communicated. Sometimes they go into kind of victim mode, but it's oftentimes what is communicated is defensiveness. I don't want to feel that. So you're the problem. Is I'm projecting onto you what I'm actually feeling about myself or inside of me. I see a lot of black and white thinking. It's like all or nothing. It's like I either, I'm either going to use for the rest of my life, I'm going to act out for the rest of my life because I'll never be good enough, or I guess I have to get sober and be bored and have no life for the rest of my life. I mean, just a lot of like, whoa, there's gray here. There can be, I am scared and I know I have to recover, or I feel shame and I understand that you have really painful experiences of my behavior. And, you can hold more than one emotion at one time, but it's a lot of times it's this pendulum swing that it's black or it is white. And I have to oftentimes say, okay, let's take like as many shades of gray in here and look at the possibilities, right? Projection, overthinking things, really being stuck in negative core beliefs is another one. Just, nothing I ever do will be good enough. Well, what's unfortunate about that is that it doesn't allow for any steps towards a brighter or more recovery focused. Because you mentioned, your addict is still in active addiction. So he's got all of this going on. And I think you can't argue with it. That's the hardest part, especially when they're in active addiction and they're not really willing to show some empathy or slow down or pause or use coping skills or reflect what they hear you saying. So you're getting a lot of all of this, and it's challenging because you don't feel heard often, I imagine. You feel like arguing with a wall that does not move. And that's because he's in a really guarded castle that I call addiction, that is like, I'm not putting down the drawbridge, and I'm in here and I'm protecting all my shame and the fear and all of the things that are keeping me inside of this, and I'm not coming out. And that is a challenging place to be. In recovery, those things start to shed and those things start to shift, and the light kind of comes on. Um, but there has to be openness, honesty, willingness, the things that we look for in recovery. So those are some common thought distortions that I see.
Oh, yeah, and the list could go on and on. I quickly put the quick little self-assessment on the it's on our Seeking Integrity website if you're watching this video, but I put the link in the chat and you can click on that. And I get people who, score in the pretty darn, like, it's you would test positive on on a COVID test, shall we say, and they're like, oh, I don't think it's that bad, and I'm just going, oh my
Minimizing,
gosh, yes, yes,
justifying.
yes.
Yeah.
But I often say this with with people, it's like, if you understood, like, I love the three circles, because the smallest circle is the stuff that we are looking to stop doing, the behaviors in this case, or using, if it's chemicals. The middle circle is kind of the, I'm on some thin ice danger zone. The biggest circle, which should hopefully grow as you're in recovery because you're more engaged, you find new things that are meaningful in your life. That's where we want to live. But no, us addicts, we're hanging on to this little tiny thing because we're scared. And we don't know how, I often say it's a maladaptive coping mechanism. I don't know how to deal with the world, so I'm going to hang on, till the bitter end, despite the negative consequences to myself and everyone else. Denial is lying to myself first. So I have to lie to myself and then lie to everyone else. So I'm going to lie and minimize. I could stop if I wanted to. I just don't want to. Well, show me you can stop, and really do it. But here's the reality. My SA partner is still in active addiction. So for you, what are you doing for your healthy boundaries, for safety for you? This is not a punishment against someone else. For me, I need to take care of myself, my physical safety, emotional safety, financial safety, spiritual safety. I'm the only one that can take care of me. Clearly, an addict in active addiction is not going to show up, and it's actually going to make things more difficult. But if I'm taking care of myself, if I'm plugging into the betrayed partner drop-in groups, if I'm, you're here. We had a betrayed partner work group that started last week, and I've added multiple people to that. Like, there's so many resources. So you taking care of you, shifting the focus off of what that person is doing, they're chaos, and they'll keep doing it until, I often say, until and unless the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. An addict, doesn't matter what form of addiction, is not going to change. And so as long as, they can keep doing what they're doing, and sure, you're upset, they're used to hearing, all the negative, and I say this cautiously, the negative noise. It's just, they can handle that because they get to hang on to their addiction. So Erin has heard this too, but like, we have guys in our treatment program that said, my spouse or partner has said that to me 100 times or 1,000 times, and I couldn't hear it. And it's, yeah, you've said it, and it's painful that you can't be heard, but they're still hanging on, with, clutching fingers to that, maladaptive coping mechanism that
Yeah.
hurts everyone. So,
Yes.
okay, the next question, Erin. I'm going to change this a little bit. It says, why do men do what they do? Can't they see how hurtful this is? And I'm going to, like, do you know how many women addicts? We have lots of people who are female sex and love addicts, sex, love, and porn addicts. So let's shift this to, why do addicts do what they do? Can't they see how hurtful it is?
I feel the pain in that one. Like, I feel there is so much hurt behind those two questions. And the thing is, there is always a why. For some, I always say, like, in treatment, we're careful about the why, because some want to come in and be like, I want to work on my trauma, right? And I'm like, well, you can't stop acting out. So we got to work on that first. We got to give you some skills to like stop the bleeding, stop. But there is a why. I've done a lot of work and research in addiction. One of the things being around trauma. And we ran a study that just, I wanted to know, because at the time it was really kind of controversial whether or not we would add trauma work to an inpatient residential program. And I was running a substance use and mental health dual diagnosis at the time. And we added a trauma therapy called EMDR. And I was just wanted to see whether or not using this modality to kind of get to some of the root causes that I saw so many trends of broken people, people that were like deeply wounded and hurt and had these, they were more critical and mean and hurtful to themselves than anyone could ever be to them. That adding that was helpful. And before we added that modality, it was like, you know, a very small amount of people that stayed sober off of substances for a year. After actually doing that, and this was a long-term situation, it was over 70% that were able to stay sober longer term. So to me, what that said is that the why is based in hurt. It's based in brokenness. It's based in, for what I see a lot with sex addiction, there's a lot of trends. The most common trend I see in our clients coming into inpatient treatment is attachment wounds. The most common I see is men that are enmeshed with their mothers. That is, it blew my mind actually when I came into sex addiction, and I started to see it all the time. And I'm like, whoa, what is this about? And then I started reading Dr. Ken Adams' work, and it's really mind blowing. But it could be early exposure to pornography. It can be that sex became a coping skill or a self-soothing mechanism at a very young age. It could be that I witnessed these, these patterns in the family and the life that I had around me. It could be simply that I was treated in such a way that I, was unable to form a healthy attachment in a romantic sense. And I constantly chased the high of validation from another person. And that's a bucket with holes. We know that there's not enough dopamine hits of validation that will ever fill that bucket. It runs out the bottom because they don't believe it about themselves. It's a short term. And also, like I said, these addicts are compartmentalized. Do they know how badly it hurts someone else? On some level, they do, because if not, there would not be the incredibly crushing shame that comes after acting out. In the addiction cycle, part of it is despair and shame. It's like, I make these commitments to myself. Okay, that was the last time, swearing it off, never doing that again. When I do it again, I broke that promise to myself. I've shown I'm completely powerless, and I know I'm hurting the people around me. When you're in the active addiction cycle, it's really nearly impossible to feel all of that, which is why I see within the first week of our guys coming into treatment, that ice begins to melt. Those defenses are starting to come down. Those walls are starting to come down, and they break. And that is the moment where I see the integration. It's like, okay, the guy on this side of the wall and on this side of the wall has merged, and the pain is really deep. They actually can feel and see that they've hurt people badly. And I remember in my own addiction journey, and I know for you, Tammy, you would say the same. When you're in it, you can't feel all of that because the shame you already feel is so great, but you're just looking to numb out from it over and over. I go back to the same thing. I cannot tolerate the discomfort. I cannot tolerate these emotions. I go back and I use or I act out because it's what actually makes me not feel all of those things. And so until you stop, I remember actually my own therapist in treatment when I went to Betty Ford years and years and years ago saying, "You're a predator." And I'm like, what? That is a really strong word. But what she was saying is that I am like an emotional vampire, that I sucked the life out of the people around me for validation because I hated myself so much that I needed other people to fill that cup, that bucket with holes. And she's like, that's not real love. That's not real connection. And it broke me because I didn't see it, So there's so many whys. And yes, the pain is inherent in addiction, and there are casualties that come with acting out and using, and it's devastating. And believe it or not, somewhere in there, unless this person is like a sociopath, they do know, but they can't stop until they have an option, a pathway out. So I feel the pain behind those questions, and I want to honor and validate and let you know I see that. And those are just some of kind of the trends, the themes, the things that I've seen coming through the doors. Lots of childhood wounding, trauma, self-hatred, you name it.
Yeah, and I always say usually a stew of all of those,
Yeah.
because I get from time to time, I'm a sex addict because of like this one thing that happened, and I was like, that's probably part of it, but to minimize all of the rest, like for example, childhood sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But if you'd gotten help when you were 7 years old, when you were molested, you know what, you probably could have been on a different path. So it's way more complicated than, like, what, I'm a sex
The
addict
one
because of
thing.
this one thing. Yeah. And if I just understand this one thing and I work on that one thing, then I'm going to magically be better. And I'm like, no, we found maladaptive coping mechanisms. And like you're like, yeah, I was like, I'm going to stay as numbed out. I'm going to, like, all of that emotional
I'm
pain
gonna,
is going to have to chase me, and I'm going to stay ahead of it. And
yeah.
until we can't.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to, like, thanks. Great. First entry into recovery. You're an emotional vampire, Erin. I'm like, thanks. Yeah, I guess this, like, it's dealing with some hard truths. It's waking up kind of hurts because you've numbed everything. And the second that that's taken away, you have to deal with the wreckage that you've caused. And it's ugly. And it takes a lot of support to walk through and show up for those people and live a living amends and to begin the process of transformation. But it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's hard, but it's beautiful.
Well, and she didn't go, and Erin, there's no hope for you. Like, I'm
No,
sorry,
she's
go
like, you
live in
got
a
to get
cave.
this first.
Yeah, yeah,
You
but
got to get this,
honestly,
girl.
yeah, but and here's how,
Mm-hmm.
and there's hope, and that's what we're saying with all the, like, there is help and there is hope,
Yeah.
but for those that stand and go, like, nope, there's nothing wrong with me, and I'm not going to do it. You then again, for partners, what are you doing to take care of you? Because that is, I will put the link in. We have the Empowered Women's. It's a fabulous in-person, amazing and healing retreat, and I will put that in for consideration. But that's how you take care of you. Take the focus off the addict, because what they're doing is not helpful, but you can
Mm-hmm.
work on taking care of you. So,
Yes.
uh,
And on that note,
mhm.
the retreat, I just actually went on my own retreat because I don't believe the work ever ends. Okay. And I've been on both sides of addiction. I've been the addict and I have been on the other side of being with an addict. And it's hellish and painful. And we don't wish it on our worst enemy. But I will tell you that there is a day that I woke up and said, I don't want to be held hostage to someone else's decisions anymore. I want to reclaim my joy. I want to reclaim the 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 self that I used to have, the trust that I used to have in my own self and intuition that I lost. I want to live again, no matter what he does. And so even now, he's long in recovery, but I just went to my own retreat this last weekend to prepare for putting on this one we're doing this next weekend, Empowered Women. Those women walked away different. And it is so easy. And no one would blame you. It's so easy to be angry and live in the pain and the trauma. And really it felt like, for me, a prison. And I just woke up and was like, who do I want to be? I don't want to be this. This is not who I want to be. And I can blame him all day because, trust me, it was your fault, buddy. But it's my job and my responsibility to make the choices about who I want to be. And so I encourage anyone who feels that I'm in that prison and it hurts and it's hard, to consider doing some deeper work and getting in connection and community with other men and women that understand, because it's one of those things that's really sensitive to share with just your family and friends. Everyone wants to pick a side or has an opinion on what you should do. And so community that really understands and can empathize with where you are is so critical and so important.
Non-judgmental. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, we would welcome it. So it's March 8th through 10th. It's in Austin, Texas. I did put the link in. You'll find more on Seeking Integrity. We're happy to answer questions. We'll
Yeah.
offer it again, but probably not till fall. It's going to be a while. So this,
Mhm.
if you're in a place and you're looking for a lifeline, we got a life raft. It's not even a line. So we got a life raft. So
And you get to meet
okay.
Tammy and I, and we're just
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
fun.
We're just
You,
fun. So
you
yeah.
don't even, you have no idea how fun we are.
Uh, don't not come because of us. So there's other people too. So.
Promise.
Okay, I'm the betrayed partner, 20 years, but had the last D-Day in August. Oh, and I lost my mind and snapped. How do you deal with the betrayal, saying horrible things? I'm sorry. How do you deal with the betrayer saying horrible things to you and in group therapy, but then turns around and says how much he loves you over and over? And I know it's all a pile of lies.
Okay, saying horrible things to you and in group therapy.
So I
And
had just 20 years and just had another D-Day in August of last year. So
ouch.
I
Okay, so how do
know.
you deal with the betrayal? I'm sorry, my brain went to trying to conceptualize. Okay, so how do you deal with the betrayer saying horrible things to you and in group therapy, and then turns around and says how much he loves you over and over
Yes.
and over? And I know it's pile lies. Yeah, well, that's some bullshit. I mean, I would set a boundary around that. I'm not. I would personally, yeah, feel that is not in alignment with your words, and your actions are not in alignment, and that is a problem for me. So I think I would be setting some emotional boundaries at a minimum, which is like, I'm not okay with you right now saying that you love me because I don't feel loved by you. And we've actually asked some of our clients, like, guys, instead of saying I love you when your actions for so many years have really shown a lot of other things, try saying, do you feel my love? Or how can you feel more loved by me? It frames it differently, because I love you can be so empty when your actions don't back that up. So I would set some emotional boundaries there, because that's not okay. It's one thing to it's one thing, when you're in a relationship, there's an addict and a betrayed partner. And yeah, there's anger, there's arguments, there's fights, there's things spewing, and going to your recovery brothers, right? Let's say in this scenario, and saying, hey, we had a really bad argument. It was really hard. She called me this, like, that's one thing. We do want our addicts to, and any one of us, to go and be able to find support. It's a different thing to be saying really horrible things about you and to you, painting you sort of as the one that is the bad guy. That's not ownership. That's not accountability. That's not kind. So I think I would be setting some boundaries with that. You don't get to come and say that you love me and try to connect with me when those words are not in alignment with the way that you are presenting me in the world. I don't feel good with that.
I'm just going to point out we have a residential treatment program for guys like that, that are, I mean, like, there's no, that isn't recovery. Because, like,
I know.
even if he had a slip, and I'm saying this with a lot of abundance of grace with that, taking the kind road, what a massive, mess up to be, like, to me, that would, I had a slip, I'm telling you all about this, and here's what I'm doing to work on this, but he just went through and set fire to everything. So to me, that is a person that doesn't really have solid recovery. He might have had abstinence and some sobriety, but there's something far more deeper going on that has not been to me addressed yet. So
Yeah.
but
And also, you got to question a group therapy setting where, like, we would not allow for that. So for, like, bashing or blaming a spouse, it's one thing to say this has been really challenging, this is what our relationship can look like, processing something. But to go off on a tangent about how horrible somebody is not something that I, as a therapist, like, would allow. So I don't know what kind of safe space that is. I don't know.
Yeah, and yeah, like I kind of wonder if it's group therapy for these specific issues or what. But we won't get in the weeds. He needs more accountability, more help. You deserve support. You know, we'd love to see you in Austin if that would work for you. But
Come
don't,
on down.
yeah, don't give up on you. Yes, it's a pile of lies. The healthy boundaries for you, regardless of what he's doing and not doing. Highly encourage that. So, okay, Erin, the betrayed partner, my partner is doing all the things he needs to do and seems genuinely in recovery. However, he was like this after the first discovery when I thought there was just one affair. I still sometimes think he is lying and faking, but he is more sincere seeming than ever before. How can I really tell what if the recovery is real? Is there a way?
Yeah, I mean, obviously actions over words, right? Words don't mean a whole lot. So actions, and it sounds like actions are showing. Now, that being said, there are no guarantees, there's no litmus test, there's no even polygraphs, right? Which we will never get into again, but is essentially there's no one way, right? And somebody can be in recovery and slip up. It is, but what I say is you take incremental steps forward together based on actions. In other words, I would say not Masters and Johnson, I'm so sorry, the Gottman said that trust is like a marble jar, and every opportunity is a moment. It's a small moment that can build trust or can betray trust. And over time, you're putting marbles in the jar. If something happens that's like, eek, that didn't feel good, I'll take one out. Trust is built in small moments. And you look at your marble jar and you make your best, consented decisions based on that jar. Their actions in those moments have built either a magnitude of these marbles, or there's not a whole lot in there. And I'm wondering why I don't feel the trust, even though he seems so genuine, right? So ensuring that those are actions and ensuring that it's incremental. In other words, I'm moving one step as you're moving one step. Not You're not going to wake up and some of that is healing the trust within yourself. I mean, that's one of the things we've talked about is we, as betrayed partners, you lose your intuition, your trust in your own gut, because you thought one thing and something else was actually happening. So sometimes I'm going to get really grounded and really do the work to feel like I trust myself and my gut. And I can rely on that. Versus when trauma is kind of running the show, it makes it really challenging because there's emotions that kind of cloud some of reality. And so I think two things: actions in the marble jar. And the second is be really sure that you're checking in with yourself and you're doing your healing and your work, because it will allow for your barometer of trust to be more accurate, per se.
Okay, the next one. My husband refuses to acknowledge that he is flawed in any way. He only views himself as a good person. Is this normal?
Well, sure. Um, it's normal in active addiction. It's normal in like narcissism. It's normal. So this is not a person in recovery, because even someone who is, even me I'm in recovery, I've got years, I can still admit in any moment, ooh, I don't like the way that I showed up. I've had moments like that with Tammy and we work together all the time. I'm like, you know what? I don't like the way that I said that, or I don't like the way I own my stuff. So that's
We
recovery.
both do.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Tammy and I, we own our stuff. And so this is, yes, we see this all the time, but that's not, that person's not in recovery. They're not doing work, because any person on any day can be accountable to flaws or mistakes. We're human, right? So they're saying I'm not human. I'm godlike, essentially, which is very narcissistic. And so that typically is what active addiction looks like, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I was thinking, like that's a really nice facade. We have lots of people who want to look really good, and and everybody, we know the underneath part, the dark corners and all of those things. So for lots of us in active addiction, we are looking like, yeah, I'm a good person. But we know, and if anybody ever really looks behind, like the Wizard of Oz, if you look behind the curtain, it's going to be really not what you expect. And so I'm going to do it again. I'm going to say, what are you doing to take care of you, because this person is clearly not able to show up. And when she says narcissist, there is narcissistic personality disorder.
Correct.
I mean, like that, and every addict, whatever form of addiction, has narcissistic traits, because we are hell bent on hanging on to our problematic behaviors. Well, they're problematic to you. They're our coping mechanisms for us. And so that
Survival.
self-centeredness is, yeah, so it looks like narcissism, but narcissistic personality disorder is a very specific thing, and honestly, then there's really no hope, because if now it's a personality disorder rather than, oh, I have narcissistic traits and I can learn to do things differently. So but for you, healthy boundaries for you to take care of you. He perceives he's a good person. He's not showing up for you, clearly. He's lying to himself and everyone else. That's the brokenness.
Mhm.
Unless he's a sociopath, but that's a whole other can of worms. So
Yeah.
okay. My SA husband and I are just starting recovery. He is still in active addiction. So you're not starting recovery. He's still in active addiction, but you're here. So that's good. We are currently separated, but want to stay together. Can you give any encouragement about what a relationship can look like on the other side? Yes.
Absolutely. I'm not kidding you. I have seen relationships on death's door often, um, completely transform, completely transform. And, but that does require both partners, to really be in recovery and in healing. And yeah, it sounds like he's still in active addiction. So, okay, here's the encouragement. If you do the work, you can 100% have a marriage that is far beyond what you ever dreamed it could be. And I've seen it. We see it often. Because sometimes, and which is where it's just funny, some addicts will say, grateful recovering addict, right? And I remember coming into the rooms in the beginning being like, F that. Like, I'll never be grateful for this mess. And now I see that if I was not brought to my knees by addiction, like literally brought to my knees, I would never have done the deeper work to be a more fully healed, fully present, fully self-aware. I'm on this journey now, and I get to be a better version of myself every day. And that was not something I sought before. I was the king of the kingdom. So when you have couples that are engaged in this process and they do make it past the pain and they're in recovery and their goal is to be a better version of themselves every day, that marriage, that partnership is insanely beautiful, really. So I do have encouragement. Like I said, we see it. I believe it. I'm part of it. I'm a living testament. So, but you got to get in the process of recovery. So yes, I'm so glad you're here. I hope he gets on the horse.
So I put in the chat some links to our testimonials, only because those are from real people who have been through our program, and we are fortunate to hear after they leave, and how it's not just about the alums. I love it when I hear alumni that say, oh, it was life changing. I care more when I hear that from partners and spouses, and we do. But I'm going to start back at, we're starting in recovery. No, him stopping is just going to be abstinence. Just not doing the problematic behavior is merely abstinence. It's not, and then there's sobriety. It's like, okay, now I'm starting to put a few of the pieces together, and I'm working on this, and I'm intentional about my actions. Recovery is we are integrated in recovery. We live this in all aspects of our life, and that takes time. So, you are here. Fantastic. You can email me. I've got bunches of resources, like the betrayed partner work group started last week. I've added several people, but the Sex Addiction 101 starts March 1st. That's just one aspect. That isn't enough, but it is a good, good piece. And he would have a foundation, he'd have a 3-circle plan. He'd have some things, and he'd have other resources. But, I send emails bunches every day to people, here's drop-in groups and here's 12-step, all of those things. So there is help and hope, but I've said it a bunch of times already. As a betrayed partner, healthy boundaries, you've physically separated, having a plan for what that separation is, not just, oh, we've separated. Otherwise you get caught in the trap of, oh, we've been separated for 6 months and we don't even know what we're doing. So getting help to help you identify, this is what we're looking for to be able to move, back together or not, so I mean, no one ever expects to have to deal with this stuff, so I'm glad you're here, because we have real resources, we have real experts, that are passionate about helping people, find healing and recovery. You get to take what you need, you can leave the rest. Everybody's on their own course. I can't tell you how many people I talked to. Somebody asked for resources, and I realized I'd sent them a whole bunch of resources last October, and they were asking the same questions and they're stuck. And I was like, well, I threw a whole bunch of resources to you and you just let them lay. And it's not a judgment, it's a sad, and it's not about the work I'm doing. It's about, you had it handed to you. I gave you names of people to call and you didn't. And so here you are stuck 6 months later, and well, 4 months later, whatever, but you're still stuck. You don't have to be, you neither one have to be. So I'm glad you're here. Okay, betrayed partner here. D-Day was October of 2023. How successful have you been? Have you seen addicts betray partners or relationships who have sustained, who have, I think, abstained from having sex for 90 days?
I think that so depends on like 1,000 different factors. So the reason why we say a period of abstinence is for all the things I've kind of brought up on this call, like around trauma, around full disclosure and consent, around learning to build emotional intimacy, right? Without causing kind of more trauma or triggering the incidents. So this is a tough question to answer because there's so many factors that go into what would be happening in those 90 days. If abstinence alone was like enough to fix the situation, I'd be like, everybody, should do this. It's more of what's happening in the 90 days while we're not having sex, right? What work are we doing? What healing are we doing? What communication, what trust building, what does recovery look like? There's a lot of things in there, but yes, definitely a period of abstinence after D-Day is a good idea. Definitely a good idea, especially you need to have full disclosure. You really do need to know what you're submitting your body for. Yeah.
And that includes porn and masturbation. That's like, trust me, like, well, we're not having sex, but, the addict still having sex with self is still, keeping all that dopamine going. I think it's really important. One of the things that we do really, really well, at Seeking Integrity is look holistically across, other things. It's gaming, cannabis, food, yes, shopping, gambling. I mean, like all kinds of things. I call it the garbage can, addict. It's like that. I can't use that one, so I'm going to use this one. Non-porn, like the TikTok, Instagram, like people get, so there's so much, just like Erin was saying, to looking at this. But for you as a partner, like giving yourself a break to really think about, what you're looking for in a relationship with this person, but really seeing, are they, have they done 90 12-step meetings in 90 days? Do they have a sponsor? What stuff are they working on? Like all of these action things would help you understand what's, going on for, within the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next one. Betrayed partner here. We're physically separated right now, and he wants me to come back to work on our marriage, but my boundary is that I need to see that he's taking recovery seriously before I feel safe enough to go back. I have little desire to return to him. Is it possibly just from the betrayal trauma and or because he isn't taking recovery seriously? Or could I still feel this way even with time healing and him doing well in recovery?
It depends, but I would say you likely will feel differently when you see him working on recovery, some time has lapsed where you're beginning to see those changes and you're beginning to do some healing within yourself. I mean, your like trauma brain, right, is like, I am seeking safety in you. And I'm looking for actions that either say I'm safe or I'm not safe. And your body, brain, mind, all is saying, I'm not safe. So I don't have a desire right now to go back. I'm not safe. So yeah, sure, there are partners that have felt even after their partner's done the work that they're like, I'm not able to move on and that my choice is to leave, and more power to you. You get to make those choices. A grounded choice, a choice that is, you are informed of what has happened and you get to decide, is this something I want to work through and heal, or is this something that I've decided I'm done? But certainly that shift is not going to happen if you're thinking about reconciliation, if they're not serious about recovery, because you're seeking in their behavior and action, am I safe with you? And he's not sending off big fireworks that say yes.
Yeah, this, like the last question is like, this is a really good time to have each of you working with qualified professionals and having the four of you talking about what it is you're looking for. So here's a bit of a challenge. Taking his recovery seriously, what does that mean to you? And he's going to think, I'm taking it really seriously. So being very clear, these are the boxes I'm looking to have checked. And I'm willing to put the relationship in safe harbor for 60 days. I'm making this up, and this is what I'm looking to see in those 60 days. And then I'm going to reevaluate, where, yeah. What is he doing? And does it feel safe enough now to look at, you can extend it and go, okay, here we go. But you'd have a plan, because what I hear in this is an addict manipulating, going like, I want you back, and then everything can go back to the way it was. And so, even after if you choose to move back in, then even after that, what is the plan for continuing the progress, that you would want to see, so that, because this happens all the time. Oh, you're back now, everything's okay, so I can rest on my laurels, I don't have to keep doing, we're good. So you would really want to have a continuum of a plan, to see if there's trust to be built, in the relationship to continue. As for your feelings, Dr. Rob talks about this all the time. Ambivalent love. I love you, I hate you. I love you, I hate you. I love you. Yes. And so trusting just your feelings. I think it's really good to have other people, like a qualified professional, and be that observer of what are the actions that are happening, within this relationship, that see you could have potential for, healing and a future together. So, but I really encourage you, work with a qualified professional. If you don't have one, email me, Tammy, TAMI, at Seeking Integrity. Tell me where you're located. I'll do my best to help you find a pro-dependent aligned support person for you. If he's been going to 90 12-step meetings in 90 days and working with a sponsor, all those kind of things, that would be encouraging. If he's just going like, I'm here and I want you back,
right?
Not so much. Oh, we're out of time, and there's good ones, but there's always good ones. So come back, people, come back. So we'll be here. So Erin will be here in 2 weeks. Dr. Rob will be here next week. We so appreciate you being here. The recording will be posted on our website. Let us know how we can support your journey. We want to be part of the healing process. So thanks, Erin.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good night. Bye.